Last week we talked about the modern ministries of truth. Today I want to ponder some of the other impacts of a ruled people. So we'll ponder that next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read and study the Constitution. We teach a rising generation to be free. I am glad you could join me. Please share this information. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. Hit share button. Let's get this video. Let's get the information out and amongst the people. There's a lot going on in our country right now, and that really isn't anything new. But let's share this information about the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, and how it is there to protect our rights and our liberties, and let's help educate the American people. As Thomas Jefferson said, if a country wanted to be ignorant and free, it wanted what never was and never will be. So let's help educate ourselves. Let's help educate our neighbors. One of the ways is by heading to the website, constitutionstudy.com. Share this information. Hey, if you disagree with it, that's fine. At least open your mind to the idea that there are other possibilities, and then check. See if I'm more right, if you're more right. Challenge what's being said. Let's get engaged in a process to make sure we are finding the truth so that we can apply that truth to our lives and to our servants in government. So let's ponder this idea of other ministries So let's ponder this idea of what it's like to live as a ruled people. I know Americans love to be free. We talk about being free. The idea that we are ruled just grates against the American spirit. But more and more, a simple observation of life shows that we are being ruled. What I find interesting, what I really want to ponder today is more, not that we're being ruled by government. There's plenty of examples of that. But look at how we're now being run by businesses. Let's take as an example the recent spree of mask mandates. Now here's what's interesting. Governments have no legitimate authority to order you to wear a mask. That is a violation of your liberty, which is a violation of the 5th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and I bet if you look, it's a violation of your state constitution as well. So how is a government official supposed to enforce this? Well, sometimes they involve law enforcement, but then even some places law enforcement refuse to comply. They try intimidation, they try code enforcement, they try health inspectors, they threaten licenses, they threaten closures, but even that people will stand up to. Whether it's the hairdresser in Texas or the gym owners in New Jersey, people are standing up to government saying, you don't have the right to do this, enough is enough. But what really scares me is when we see businesses enforcing these rules for government. You see, I have the legitimate right to ignore a law repugnant to the Constitution. Now, I may suffer the consequences for doing so, but the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and both Alexander Hamilton and Chief Justice Marshall said any rule, any law contrary to the Constitution is void. I don't have to follow a void law. But what happens when local businesses, they enforce these laws? Now, we see it mostly with large corporations today, where you see the Walmarts and the Targets and the Best Buys enforcing the rules that government can't. See, government can't legally tell me I have to wear a mask in public, but if a business says I must wear a mask on their premises, legally I have to. Which leaves me with a choice. Do I do business with them, or do I avoid doing business with them? Now, that's a decision each and every American has to make with each and every business. And I find it very interesting that in some places, these companies, these corporate entities, are enforcing these rules very strictly, while others, they basically are ignored. I can't tell you how many stores I walk into here in Middle Tennessee with signs that said, face mask required, and most of the people aren't wearing masks. When I walk in the door, no one says anything about me not wearing a mask. But what happens when those corporations decide they're going to enforce those rules? What happens when your grocery store or your pharmacy refuses to let you do business with them unless you wear a mask? Not as big a deal. What happens when they refuse to allow you entry unless you can prove you've been vaccinated? And if they can require you to be vaccinated for COVID-19, why not for the flu? Why not for the common cold? Why not for whatever disease they decide is dangerous at that time? What happens when the businesses enforce the rules that governments can't? Well, we can always go to the small mom and pop shops, right? Because they aren't enforcing these rules. But what happens when they do as well? You see, right now, most of the businesses are under the false impression that the government has the authority to tell them that you have to wear a mask on their premises, that you have to limit the number of people on your premises, that you have to enforce social distancing, that you have to be closed after a certain hour, because we all know that the virus isn't effective until after 10 p.m. And they bow. Now, sometimes they bow because these corporations, these businesses, think that's the best answer. And if that's their opinion, well, they're welcome to it. However, I believe most of them are bowing to these because they don't want the hassle of fighting with government. You see, if you're on the board of Walmart or Target or Costco, it's a lot easier to say, we'll just follow the rules than to spend the time and the money to fight the government in court. Let's face it, in court, you might lose. There's very little upside to them standing up and spending that time and money, because very few people will come alongside them and say, yay, because you did this, I will support you. On the other hand, if they challenge and they lose, well, they have to pay court costs, they have to pay fines, and they get this black eye in the media of being uncooperative. What happens when governments no longer have to push large corporations to enforce these? What happens when they have the opportunity to pick on small businesses? Now, again, we've seen this at the local level. We've seen code enforcement used and health inspectors used to attempt to shut down businesses because they don't comply with a void government edict. What happens when businesses look at this and say, I can't afford not to comply? I have a family to feed. I have employees with the families to feed. And if I don't comply, I won't be able to feed them. Well, part of this comes back to a basic idea of a free economy. In other words, the American people cannot be compelled to do business with a certain company. You can't be forced to go to Walmart. You can't be forced to go to Target. You can't be forced to go anywhere. It's one of the reasons why the individual mandate in the Affordable Care Act is so repugnant to the Constitution. But the question is, if these businesses see no upside in standing up for what's right, why is that? Let me give you an aside. For me personally, I use an Apple iPhone rather than an Android-based device. I use an Apple iPad rather than an Android-based device. And do you know why? I'll give you two examples. There have been numerous articles of Android devices, even though they're set to not transmit data back to Google, transmitting data back to Google. You turn off location tracking, and they find that, oh, by the way, when you get home at night, all of a sudden your phone sends location data. To me, that is a company acting in bad faith, and I don't want to do business with a company that acts in bad faith. On the other hand, I look at Apple and their iPhone. There's a lot Apple does I don't particularly like, but as far as I know, Apple doesn't transmit my location data if I turn it off. In fact, Apple has actually stood up to the federal government and refused to put a back door into their iOS system to allow government to gain access to a device without a warrant. I like that. That's an attitude that I appreciate. Therefore, that's a company I'm going to support. That's a company I'm going to stand behind. Do I have to pay more for an iPhone than I would for an Android phone? Yeah, a lot more. But what is my security worth? What is my liberty worth? Am I willing to support a company that stands up and says, no, we will not give the government a backdoor into our devices, or one that we know is capturing data and transmitting data that we have not authorized? So let's take this to you and to me and the rest of the business. Let's look at a hypothetical situation. Let's say in your town there are two hair care places, barbershops, hairdressers, whatever. There are two. They cut men's and women's hair, and they are both open. They both do reasonably good jobs of cutting hair. There's not really much difference between the two. However, when your state or your county or your city issues a shutdown, tells both of these businesses to close, one closes, one stays open. One says, I'm going to submit to government. I'm going to be a subject of government. I'm going to be ruled by this entity. The other one says, no, I'm not. And my question is twofold. Which place do you do business with? More importantly, when the restrictions are lifted, which business do you do business with? Once your hairdresser that shut down because the government said so opens back up, do you run back to them because, well, you like them? Even though they sold out their rights and doing so impacted you negatively? Why? Now, the other business, do you go there? Do you go there simply because it's open? As soon as the lockdowns are lifted, do you go back to your normal habits, or do you go back and say, you know what? You protected my rights when it was difficult. I will continue to do business with you. Or do you go to them and say, you know what? You protected my rights when it would cost you something. I will continue to do business with you. Now you may say, well, no, they protected their own rights, but in protecting their rights, they also protected your rights. And when they're there and code enforcement shows up, or the whatever licensing board, when they are threatened, what do? Do you read it on the news and go tisk, tisk, tisk? Or do you go there and support them? Do you stand at the door and require code enforcement get a warrant? Do you stand with them? Do you offer to help support them? Do you offer to help pay their fines? Do you support those who are fighting for rights and liberty? You see, part of being a ruled people means we don't support those that are fighting for our rights. Sadly, that seems to be a lot of what I see in the American public. Now, I know a lot of places it's not really that big a deal because these companies are not enforcing these rules in the vast majority of the land as far as I can tell. But a law, an illegal law that is enforced in one place tends to migrate to another. You set a standard. You set a precedent of what government can and cannot do. So here's what I want you to consider. I want you to consider these lockdown, shutdown orders, these mask mandates, and I want to consider, what are you going to do? Are you going to let your fellow business owners, your fellow citizens, be trampled by government, or will you stand up with them? Will you let your life be ruled both directly and indirectly by government, or will you demand that they act as servants within the boundaries we've created for them? Have you stopped to think of what it would mean to a business owner to know that their customers will come and stand and support them if they do the right thing, or that their customers will abandon them if they don't? If you're worried about what these large corporations will do as push comes to shove and government edicts become greater and greater and more intrusive, what have you done to incent them to not follow illegal laws? Have you considered even buying some stock? You buy one share of stock, you get to go to the stockholders meeting. And in most cases, you get to ask questions. You may ask them, are you going to stand up for the rights of your customers, or are you going to fold to illegal government orders? Can you make an influence on a Walmart or an Apple or a Costco? Individually, no. But do we do what we do because it is right, or because we're guaranteed an outcome? If that's the way our founding fathers thought, we'd still be British subjects. The question is, do you want to be a free people, or do you want to be ruled directly by government or indirectly by them pressuring businesses to enforce their laws for them? Because I look at the future and I say, mask mandates and lockdowns and shutdowns are not the end of the story. When have you ever known government to assume a power and then give it back? If we don't stand up, refuse to follow illegal laws, refuse to support businesses that will not protect their own rights, and support those that will protect their rights and by extension our rights, then the sacred fires of liberty in America are going out. The blessings of liberty are being destroyed. And as Ronald Reagan warned us, one day we'll be telling our children and our grandchildren what it was like when America was actually a free country. I know, 2 weeks in a row, pondering being ruled by government or being ruled by businesses. It's not an enlightening thing, and I wish I had better news. The only good news I have is we, the people, still have the ability to act freely. We must use it before we lose it. We must learn to understand what a government can and cannot do, what a government can and cannot force a business to do, and we must act accordingly, especially at the point of supporting those who are standing up for their rights. We don't see much about it on the news, but the information is out there. We must go and support these groups. We must support these people, these businesses that are trying to do the right thing, and often in the face of ruinous, government rules. If we won't support them, who's going to support us? If we won't defend those who are defending their rights, who will come and defend us when we're trying to defend ours? So please head over to the website, constitutionstudy.com, find out more, share this video, share the idea that we need to stand up for what is right, even if we lose. At least let us go down fighting. At least let us go down standing for liberty. Because if you don't stand for liberty now, there'll be no liberty left to stand for later. Consider donating to the podcast through the website. Help me keep giving you the information you need to help live free. Most of all, as I said, share this news, like, subscribe, but come back next time. We'll ponder something else on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand.